Well, thank you for joining us. This is the Budget in Focus. I am Caroline Murphy, Public Relations Officer attached to the Ministry of Home Affairs. Today we'll be discussing the budget allocation for the security sector. And joining me is the person responsible for that sector, the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Robeson Benn. And he will shed some light on the budget allocations for this sector and the importance of it. Thank you, Minister Benn, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Caroline, for giving me this opportunity to discuss some generalities in relation to the budget and more specifically the impacts of the budget in relation to our security sector.
So, Minister, Budget 2024, the largest budget ever, with a historic $1.146 trillion, fully funded with no new taxes. Can you give us your thoughts on how this will impact Guyanese?
Well, first off, the fundamental issue relating to it is that it's the largest budget ever. It has implications for our development, our country's development. As you stated, there are no new taxes. In fact, there are new measures related to every Guyanese, but which will most impact the most vulnerable groups in our society. And I would say overall, the fact that our balance of payments issues are stable. There's growth, total growth in the economy. I think our GDP growth has increased by over 30%. We have had in the non-oil sector, as you know, we're an oil economy, fast growing now. But beyond oil, what underpins total growth is the fact that we've had about 11% growth in the non-oil sector. So importantly, we're at a position where we have the ability to make dramatic improvements in the lives of Guyanese and in the development of our country. In relation to its impact in generality on the security sector, the developments we're having in the economy, the investments in infrastructure, the investment in the security assets and personnel speak to the need to make sure that the developments we have are protected, that we have a more secure and peaceful country, that we move on progressively, as pointed out to by Minister Ashley Singh's presentation in his budget speech, of staying the course, as was set out in the PPP Civics Manifesto over this period, the way we are moving our country, our development forward. And so I am particularly very happy at the point we are now, and more particularly as being a part and seeing this development, which for me, being an older person, I'm seeing dramatic transformation, particularly now in my lifetime, and which augurs well for the young people of Guyana going forward. So I'm extremely happy at the opportunity we have. We have, I think, $90.6 billion in the budget for the Ministry of Home Affairs this year. This is, I think, over 20, 30 or what percent increase. It speaks to our ability to make up the gaps in facilities, in training, in making improvements in the security sector under the Ministry of Home Affairs, making up the deficits which have existed and which we inherited over a number of years. We are, like the economy, poised for takeoff, but the developments in the country economic, infrastructural, and other developments have to be protected. And that is our mandate, our mission in the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Thank you for that, Minister. You mentioned infrastructure. And for the Guyana Police Force, how will the completion of police stations and command centers in various regions and the construction of the state-of-the-art Brigdam Police Station contribute to the overall effectiveness of law enforcement?
Well, as I suggest that these improvements in the infrastructure, in buildings, in facilities for the police force itself are sorely needed. Uh, why we did not expect, say, for the Brigdam police station, that at this point of time we would have been building a new police station. Uh, Police persons were functioning in the main police station and in the largest urban hub in Guyana in fairly rudimentary, partially dilapidated circumstances. There was a fire. It put the pressure on us to find the funding and the agreement to put a new building, state-of-the-art, modern, 12-story, and we'll be able to bring together all the assets, all the facilitation and technology of a modern police station in Georgetown, and which will interface with all the police divisions throughout the country too, so that we will match the cusp of development in our country in terms of clamping down on crime and violence in our country. This change itself at Brigdam, as are the other police stations, Madia, Denamstel, all of those which we are building out or rehabilitating, repairing, renovating, along with the new command centers, will give new ergonomics, will improve the spirit of engagement of police persons, will match the training which we will give them to do the new types of jobs in policing which are necessary, and take us into a whole new world, a brave new world of policing, where we will restore respect, integrity, and professionalism in the forces. Not simply the police force, but we're also doing the similar issues in the prison service and in the fire service. But overall, it's a brave new day for policing and for the persons in the police force who will be trained, and having been trained much better, but they will now be placed in more proper, ergonomic, compatible with this new skills level in new circumstances to so give their type of service which will match the needs of our society and which should help to protect the economic and physical development in our country.
Thank you. Minister, you mentioned training. What type of training can we see in 2024 for the Guyana Police Force?
For the Guyana Police Force, there has been support to many police persons in relation to academic training, both at the University of Guyana. There has been professional training both in Guyana and overseas. There's a continuous training and retraining and upgrading of training skills in the Guyana Police Force. This will continue. We are working to bring on a new vision, as it were, which we spoke of, but also too, we are looking to partner with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, with elements in the United Kingdom Police, and others in relation to skills transfer, knowledge transfer, issues in relation to export results in crime solving, but particularly too in how do we engage with the public. How do we work to deflect issues which may, if not attended to early on, escalate in criminal behavior and into crimes. And so those are some of the number of issues that we will work on in respect of police training There will be regional engagements too, uh, with the regional police forces, Trinidad, Barbados, and Jamaica, in relation to some of the challenges they have and what we could learn from the challenges they are experiences and how they are responding to those challenges in the best way. So much training to be done, engagement in the communities, training continuing as we've been working with the Ministry of Human Services in relation to domestic violence issues. Uh, the Guyana Police Force has to be in continuous training if it is to match its mission and the goals we have set out for it.
Thank you, Minister. We know that the community policing group, they work closely with the Guyana Police Force. And the budget mentioned the formation and expansion of more community policing groups. How does this contribute to building stronger partnership between law enforcement and the local communities?
We have to, this is a particularly important question. We have to restore a higher level of trust and confidence in policing in the communities. So the partnership between the community policing groups and the police force is particularly important. We have to put arrangements in place where the community policing groups will become a vehicle for those who, young persons in the communities, would want to join up to help them make their community safer, but also to consider pathway into going into the discipline services. This is one of the issues that we're looking at, and particularly now to the west on the 𝐁𝐔𝐃𝐆𝐄 side, beyond the question we've always discussed with our community policing groups, the question of them bringing actionable intelligence on bad or gross behavior or even misdemeanors which could escalate to bad things happening. Beyond that actionable intelligence, we want the community policing groups in the interior areas along the western borderline, particularly, to be the eyes and ears in relation to the continuing sovereignty questions we have in relation to Venezuela, in relation to that controversy that is there on which we have been working at. So more energy, more money would be put into the community policing infrastructure, more facilitation, more equipment, and training too, and also their engagement in the communities with respect to youths, youth groups, women's groups, and developing better community spirit in those communities where they exist. So there'll be an expansion of those groups and more energy in respect to the things that they do.
Thank you. Let's move a little over to the prison service, the Ghana Prison Service, with emphasis on healthcare and mental health. With a budget allocation of $6.5 billion to that sector, how will this service contribute to the rehabilitation and well-being of inmates?
Well, in totality, we are looking at a more empathetic approach in relation to the prison service. We have been pushing the position that we want to emphasize rehabilitation. We want to have the conditions less brutal and disgraceful than we inherited. I think we've gone a far way along with that. We have been doing much work in relation to making the new prison buildings, modules. We are putting in new prison buildings at Lusignan. We are also putting in new women's prisons there, along with 2 other modules for male prisoners. We are also putting in a new school and an infirmary for prisoners who are ill. We are looking to, in respect of the question of psychological or psychotic issues related to prisoners, paying particular attention to bringing in more and more persons who will help with their medical and psychological, psychiatric support. It is true that we have a number of prisoners who are either coming out of influence of drugs or for other reasons who need special care and continuous attention in relation to those issues at the psychological level. And this is something that we will be making more important as we go forward. One of the things we're looking at in totality with the prison is that we want them more actively involved in the prison. So beyond the new school, beyond the new vocational training, and beyond the new questions of them doing things in raising agricultural products for their own consumption, we want them more actively involved and not being listless in the prison, not being cut off from the support even in the prison system and also from their families. So one of the things in rehabilitation and reducing recidivism is our creating more space for what we call the Fresh Start Project. And that project sees that if prisoners are suitable and stable enough on being released from the prison system, that their reintegration in society, with their families, with their communities, should see them having the means to leave prison with some basic equipment and the training to do particular things which would bring in money for them, an income for themselves and their family, so that they will not be dumped out, so that they could earn money for themselves, whether they've been trained in electrical work or construction work or clean up things in the communities, whether they're trained in carpentry. They will be given the basic things for a fresh start, a renewed start. And we hope that this will reduce questions of recidivism and reduce the attractiveness for them of resorting back to crime in the communities, perhaps without being caught, and providing, on exiting the prison, a better example in the community as to what the prison system has made of them having come out of the prison. We think that this would save us money, actually, and that this is a particularly important issue. Both the few women and male prisoners who have so far joined on and been facilitated by this program were very enthused. And I recall being given the opportunity to pass on some of the equipment to the prisoners. They either brought their wife or their husband or partner at those sessions. And it was very encouraging, the welcome atmosphere which it engendered.
Okay, sir. The budget also outlined plans for consolidating prison facilities. How will this consolidation contribute to the overall effectiveness and efficiency of the Ghana Prison Service?
One of the issues with the prison service has been that it has been very spread out. We've had prisons, establishments at Timeri, the historic Mazaruni prison system, the Lusignan prison system, and one of the problems in the management of those facilities, one, the decrepit state, the fact that after the Camp Street prison was burned down, that we had a large number of inmates transferred to Lusignan after that large loss of life there, and there was no facilitation for them. So we're consolidating Georgetown mostly with new facilities at Lusignan. We're also, to improve the effectiveness of management, building a new prison headquarters at Lusignan. And that will be having all the monitoring systems, but also the administrative areas which will deal with issues with health and prisoner and family re-engagement, and questions relating to the juvenile service system to make it more efficient. So we think that when we bring these all together, particularly that the treatment, care, and the security in relation to prisoners will be more efficient, that the show relations between prison officers and prisoners will be better improved, and particularly in relation to the persons who have to deal with prison welfare and the training of prisoners, that they will be better positioned to impart their training in respect of that. So eventually we see, ultimately, the main prisons being, of course, at Mazaruni for high profiles, convicted prisoners, Lusignan, where there may be most of the prisoners in totality, but also at Borbies, at New Amsterdam, where there will also be some prisoners in new circumstances, in new buildings there, which are now being built at this moment, but all will be integrated in the monitoring and administrative solutions and buildings at Lusignan.
Yes, sir. Let's move on to the Guyana Fire Service. We know that for the year, so thus far, they have planted 238 hydrants. So the budget also highlights efforts of servicing and installing more fire hydrants. How will this contribute to the overall readiness of the Guyana Fire Service?
Yes, well, the readiness of the fire service relates to our having new or refurbished equipment. We've been working with Angloco, which is a historic fire service asset development makers in the United Kingdom and Finland. The hydrants which he have planted at great expense will relate to the GWI infrastructure, particularly in new communities. We have had two problems. One is that there are many hydrants in the traditional areas, in the urban areas, which are decrepit, don't have water in them, or if the water is there, it's not pressurized enough. And so we've done a lot of work to fix that. But also there's a question of the new communities, the new housing areas. We have to put hydrants in place, and we are spreading that effort out. This investment is directed towards making sure we have better capability in the new housing areas. Of course, there's always a question when the fire truck arrives whether it has water, and we love to repeat. Sometimes we are irritated, of course, when people say, oh, the fire truck comes without water. Well, fire trucks always come with water. The issue is having expended the amount, the 300 or 400 gallons of water which they may have on them. The question is either going to an open source or a fire hydrant, which has to be pressurized to continuously fight a large fire. So, along with the investment, we want to encourage, and the outreaches are on, in making sure that there's better awareness and a better approach towards fire safety. We've talked about people installing fire detectors, smoke detectors. We've talked about people having fire extinguishers in their homes and businesses, and the means of fighting a fire in a large bond or a large building, commercial building. We've talked about and we've given out a few fireballs, but the awareness is the most important thing. We are expanding the service. We built a new Wales fire station. We have built a new fire headquarters here on the home stretch itself, with enough space and facilitation to improve responsiveness. But while we look at putting out new fire stations, and while we're building new assets, and while we're looking at the questions of a new fireboat even now, and a high-rise ladder truck, which has already been used and rescued people from the fire on the Ramada. The more important thing is beyond training for the fire servicemen, it is fire awareness and fire prevention.
Thank you, sir. And how will the allocated funds for training build the human resources of the Ghana Fire Service?
Well, the monies allocated for the training in the fire service relate not only to the training of the firefighters. We have had a discussion with the firemen receiving training from Barbados, where there's a fire training facility. We also have one, but we are in talks for visits uh, to Bovista, where there's not simply a fire service, but also a rescue service, but also it relates to EMTs. There's a lot of work being done in getting to people who have medical needs, who are ill, and the ambulance service does a lot of work on a daily basis, and it's an integral part now of the fire service. So there's training on the medical technology, medical response part. There has to be new training in relation to rescue services, and there has to be also training in relation to continuously standard firefighting and fighting fires from the estuary, from the Demra River. We're bringing in a new fireboat. More people have to be trained in relation to issues on the maritime side. There are more and more wharves being built as the economy builds out, and we are upping our capacity and our responsiveness on the river in relation to the question in totality on fire. But it needs continuous maintenance and training and retraining and engagement and preparation in relation to the question of fires. Unfortunately, over the past year, and 2023 has been a difficult year in relation to fires. We had the tragedy at Madhya. I see that the COI documentation is out. We have to learn from that tragic experience and see where we can support each other and the other agencies in relation to the issue. We have gone to all the dormitories and schools in the interior and also on the coast in relation to making sure that they are prepared, that they have the facilitation in relation to ingress, egress, and response, early response to the questions of fire. But more work has to be done in relation to public awareness and also to set aside issues relating to the responsiveness of the fire service itself.
Thank you, Manessa. And finally, since the year has started, there has been a lot of road accidents, and we had surpassed our previous year's percentage. Can you say what can be done to minimize that going forward?
Unfortunately, and thank you, I think this follows on to the question of fires because we've had the bad fire deaths and a lot of what we'll call malicious setting of fires in 2023. With respect to those, we are passing those on to the police in any event. Question of malicious setting of fires, because it's a problem related to fire deaths. In relation to road accidents and road deaths resulting, our basic proposal at the moment is to push the beyond activity of the Guyana Police Force is to increase fines and other penalties. We think that the behavior in too many instances are egregious. There's too much speeding, there's too much drunk driving, there's too much showing off with loud music and young men doing wheelies on the road, the crash dummies I call them, motorcyclists. And the motorcyclists are the remarkably high number of persons who are dying on the road in spite of all giving out free helmets, in spite of our admonishing and speaking to people, we are having too many young men dying on the roads. We see that the behavior can be curtailed. The behavior can only be curtailed by the resort to higher fines, higher penalties, some other resorts in terms of the point system in respect of the driver's licenses. We are putting up speed cameras along with the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Public Works, to get a clamp on the behavior. What we have to recognize is that we've had, after COVID completely, and with the growth in the economy, there's a greater growth in the number of persons who are driving cars. So there's greater utilization of vehicles and other means of transportation on the road. We had the resort to making an amendment in the law in relation to e-bikes, because they are indeed a part of the problem in how they think they can be on the road and what safety precautions they should take. But much more needs to be done in this area. We're losing too many young lives in relation to this problem, and the behavior has to change. And for us older drivers, minibus drivers, taxi drivers, and others, we too have to give a better example to younger persons who are using the road, who are young drivers, who are new drivers. We've got to look at when or if we need to up the level of training, the level of certification, and whether we should be doing retraining for some persons who are repeat offenders in relation to dangerous driving, reckless driving, drinking and driving, driving while distracted. So those are some of the considerations we have on board for us to take up in 2024.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for joining us. I encourage you to keep up to date with the budget debate, which will commence on Monday, to be aware of what is in store for you. Thank you.
And thank you, ma'am, for having me for this informational session to the public.
You're welcome.